Good morning all. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Chris Whitehead. I'm the Managed Platform Product Manager for Solutions PT. So I've got about half an hour this morning, which I'm actually going to talk to you about Proteus and give you a quick overview. And then actually, when we break for lunch, I've got a full running setup in the back. So if you actually want to come see it in a bit more hands-on detail and get a bit more grips with it and see a bit more detail, feel free to come and find me and ask me any questions you've got. So when I was actually planning what I was going to talk about with this, I actually thought I'd use some feedback from previous events to begin with. And some of the interesting stats that came out of this was actually that the majority of customers at previous events have seen cybersecurity as a main concern on their kind of priorities list in the next 12 months, which is handy being at a cyber event day today. We also saw that more than 70% of customers saw cybersecurity as a barrier to implementing new technologies for the risks, the research, the time, the effort involved in looking at these. And ultimately, actually, some of the feedback we got from that was the cost of downtime because of either not putting in new technologies, new solutions to address these issues, or actually understanding the risk of cybersecurity caused downtime. And ultimately, downtime in manufacturing plants and control systems has got a very, very high cost associated to it. So actually led me then to take the information from many meetings I've had over the last 12 months or so and actually look at some of the key facts that have come out of this. Now, some of these may be glaringly obvious to some of you, maybe not so obvious to others. But the key point is backup alone is no longer enough. The number of conversations I've had the last 12 months or so where people go, oh, we've got a backup. Okay, will you do anything with the backup? Do you ever test it? Do you ever prove it works? Well, no, but we've got a backup somewhere. Okay, is that backup as a legacy as the control system it's protecting? And 9 times out of 10 it was. The threat of ransomware isn't going away. And you heard Jay mention there's some scary fact of over 300,000 new signatures, new behaviors found via ransomware every single day. So this is not something that's been a flash in the pan. It's not going to be, it happened for a couple of years and it vanished. These threats are continually evolving. The payloads being delivered are continually changing, and as such, you need to keep on top of a way of being able to protect yourselves against it. Obviously, data protection is paramount. New laws coming in this year, particularly in the UK. So most of you have probably heard about GDPR. Data protection is becoming more paramount. The breaches that have been seen in the last couple of years are no longer going to be tolerated because cybersecurity has become such a critical subject, not just in control systems, but in everyone's world. So everyone's data is very, very sensitive, and the risks of losing that has got bigger penalties and bigger risks associated to it. As such, there's more focus in the media, in the mainstream, events like this, and everyone being more aware of not wanting to lose information to hackers, not wanting to let information walk out the door. And one of my favourite lines on there, and I get this so often, is people go, well, we've got snapshots. Well, snapshot's not a backup. And if it all goes terribly wrong, that snapshot's absolutely no use to you whatsoever. So I get the people who've got these nice big virtual infrastructures and they've got the technology to take snapshots, but then put all their eggs in one basket and think that is a good enough backup solution to be able to recover from a full system outage. And one other scary stat that came out of all these conversations is the number of people that do take backups, whether it be hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, but then do nothing with them. They never test them. And this is normally where people will come unstuck, is when actually all does go wrong, and then they have to go and dig out that backup that's been in the fire safe for the last 2-3 years. They've got no more new relevant data, but actually now they do have a backup and they can try and recover it. This is where they normally find the backup's not taken correctly, some of the data's missing. Someone added something 2 years later, a new drive, new volume or something, and separated it, and now it's not in the same shape and size it was when they first backed it up. And lastly, the most obvious one there is data loss costs are going to be absolutely huge, whether that's through loss of production, rework time, re-engineering effort, but the costs get absolutely astronomical. And if you start factoring there the likes of like your, legislative cost, if you do get fined for a breach in future, they're going to be absolutely huge as well. So Jay is obviously a very well-rounded speaker to listen to, so I really struggled to find a really interesting story to try and keep up with Jay with in terms of this event. So I spent a couple of hours the other night having a quick look for reasonably large data breaches that had a reasonable amount of data in them, so I could actually give you some usable info. And the first one that cropped up was actually Disney's Pixar Toy Story 2. So for those of you who've got kids, probably been endured to watch this at some point, probably many times over in the last couple of years. But what you probably don't know is that Toy Story 2 in 1998 was deleted accidentally. And this happened for a few reasons. So one of the first reasons is one of the guys who was actually working in the production office had root access and didn't need it. and it accidentally run 14 characters. Those 14 characters basically started removing the folder structure with all the subsets of folders in there, with all these animation files in. So as these guys are actually watching what's going on, and they're doing like a proof run through, they're seeing elements disappear, so like Woody's hat goes, then someone's eyes disappear, and they think, oh, sugar, something's really going wrong here terribly quickly. So they pulled the power lead on the server. Just drop it, stop it deleting anything more, you know, and hopefully capture it before it starts to destroy out absolutely everything. So what was interesting was the rest of the production office thought, well, it's just a network outage. Everyone put the laptops away and they all went for lunch. No one questioned it. They just said, well, I've lost network connection, I can't get to the data. It's nearing lunchtime, we'll just go out and get a bite to eat. So I didn't think anything more of it, and just left for the day. Actually, in those few minutes, what actually happened was 8 man-years of data was deleted. So this is a phenomenal amount of data that was deleted very quickly because someone who had root access, who didn't need it, run a command they weren't quite sure what they were doing with and shouldn't have had access to run in the first place. But what's interesting now is that it's not massive amounts of data compared to what we usually talk about today. We're only talking 10 gigabytes of data. Well, you've got to bear in mind, this is 20 years ago. So this 10 gigs of data was roughly 90% of the film's content. But they said, it's okay, we've got backups. We're backing up our 10 gigs of data to 4 gigabyte tapes. Now, tapes, as you've heard I mentioned in Andy's thing, are normally something that terrifies us, and this is the reason why. So the guys were backing up the 4 gig chunks of data to these tapes, but in an oversight, a mishap as it might be, or maybe just bad planning, they hadn't accounted for where the error logs needed to be written to as well, so they put them on the same volume. So as the backup libraries are churning out these 4 gigs of data, it was full, 100% full, no 0 bytes of data left to put anything else on. So when the error log should have been updated to say the backup's not completed successfully because the volume's full, it wasn't writing it. So they weren't getting any notification that the backups weren't completing 100% successfully. They had some data, didn't have all of it, but they weren't getting the notifications via the error logs to say, excuse me, that the actual drive volumes were completely full and couldn't take any more data. So at this point, they've lost the film, they've got no usable backups, and they're 6 months away from the point of when the actual film is due to be released. So people start to panic. And then they realize they've got an absolute golden savior in the name of a lady called Galen Sussman. So she's the film's technical director, and about 4 weeks prior to this incident happening, started a maternity leave. She had a little boy, Eli. And she was determined to work from home, so she spoke to Disney, and they said, well, we're going to prep one of the graphics processing workstations for you. So they put it into the network in the office, they seeded it with a full copy of the film, and they give it her to take home. So she put it in at home, and it was receiving updates every 2 weeks via ISDN. So we're talking well before the days of proper broadband. So she's got a complete set of the data in this, home server that's in her house. So the producer and a few other guys realize this, think we're absolutely saved. We're going to, get across town now in the car, go and pick this thing up and drive it back, and we're good to go. And this is where it gets interesting. So they dive in the car, they hot-tail across town to Galen's house. They say, can we take the server back, explain what's happened? She says, yeah, fine, no problem. So it's not been updated for 2-3 weeks now, but so they pack the server in the car and they put in duvets and pillows and everything else around it. And they set off very carefully back across town. Not as fast on the way back. But what they do realize is suddenly, on the way back, this Volvo has got the only world's copy of Toy Story 2 in it. So the Volvo is now worth £90 million. And they're driving very, very carefully. They get it back to the office, and they said it was like a welcome party for the royals. They brought boards out. It wasn't one person carried the server, and they took 6 people around an 8x4 board with this server strapped to the top of it. Got it all back inside, and that's when the real work started. So it took a team of 450 people, so all the animators, all the data engineers, scientists, network guys, backup specialists within Disney Pixar, 24 hours a day on a full 1 week rotation to get all that data merged, because the produced data that was on the server wasn't part of the backup set, so they couldn't just merge all the data in. And that wasn't actually then the complete set of data that we'd actually deleted. So there was still an element of data lost, but it took 450 people a whole week to recover what was done in 14 key presses from someone who shouldn't have had access to what they were doing. So it's an insight in, that actually even the big companies who've got backup technologies, who've got these big infrastructures, and have got all these people to look after these different elements, still get it wrong. But the point is, if you're not checking your backups, this could happen to you as well. So what I'd like to do is naturally introduce you now to Proteus, which is our business continuity and disaster resilience service. So this is something we've done for a while now, and over the next couple of minutes I'm going to give you a brief introduction to what we do with the service and how we use it, and actually some of the key fundamental technologies we use that will help address some of the issues and challenges we've seen and talked about today. So, to start with, it is a fully monitored solution. So we take that onus away from you. You don't need to monitor and maintain your backups. We're doing that, so we're ensuring they're backing up correctly. We ensure that they are backing up completely. The data is usable. We are using hybrid cloud technology as well. Now, this has been mentioned briefly today, but essentially we back up to a local vault on the plant, and then we have the option to replicate it to a private UK data center as well. So if you don't have two specific sites, excuse me, and you need that offsite replication for data compliance, so if the vault was damaged, was lost, flooded, etc., then you've still got your data. We provide that as a data warehousing service as well. All the data is encrypted, so as we're taking the backups from endpoint to the vault, we encrypt it to AES-256. So if you've got the likes of Jay snooping around your network, listening to all your packets, and he's eavesdropping, any information that can be lifted out of that can't be reassembled. So actually, no one can take a complete data set of what's being backed up. As we take it from the vault to the cloud as well, we encrypt that. And we can actually also give you the option to encrypt all the backups as well. So if you wanted to, we can encrypt the actual data set as well. Now, this is true full 256 encryption. If you give us the encryption key and we encrypt it, and you lose the key, we haven't got a backdoor in, we can't undo that. So we do say we treat that very, very carefully, and we make sure you've got proper documentation around keeping that key safe. As mentioned, the ability to actually prove your backups is paramount in a situation like this. So as an autonomous task every day, we take each one of the machines we're protecting and backing up. We take one of those backup points, we mount it as a virtual machine, spin it up so we prove it's actually bootable, is usable, and gets to a Windows login prompt. That gets screenshotted and sent out to you. So not just we're actually saying the backups have completed, we've got provable restore bootability from each one of the backup points that we're taking. So any system we say we are backing up and protecting, we can prove that can be recovered should something go wrong or should it need to be tested. Now, we've heard ransomware mentioned several times today, and one of the very, very clever things we do with this is actually using a behavior-based system, which obviously we've heard briefly mentioned earlier, is to actually look for the signatures that ransomware would normally display. So we'd see a great amount of data change from backup point A to backup point B. So from point of infection, you'd see tons of new encrypted files and a lot of delta change. They're some of the key things that we would look for. So if we think we've got a ransomware infection because we're checking the backups for you, we'd be on the phone within a few minutes, say, we think actually system A that we're protecting here might have a ransomware infection. Excuse me. So it actually allows us to respond very quickly if we think there is an infection in there and actually deliver that value of that service by understanding and having the ability to actually virtualize locally on the Vox. So we could take the backup point that we think might be infected and spin it up completely isolated from the network in an entirely safe method and prove if it is a true ransomware infection or not. A lot of the times we don't see them. We get the ransomware notifications, and actually what it is people are now implementing new cybersecurity strategies and have just not told us that they've encrypted all the endpoints. So we then see roughly the same behaviors you'd see from ransomware, so a lot of delta change, a lot of new encrypted files, but it is actually truly, it's a safe system. But it highlights to us, we raise those alerts, and then we're in contact with you, to help get those resolved. Okay, so once we've actually got things protected to the vault, we have the ability to do hardware-independent restoration. So if you've standardized on the likes of Dell or HP and use a traditional image-based backup system, you take an image of that, you would need an almost identical spare to be able to put your image back onto. Otherwise, you've then got to start messing around putting drivers and everything else in. And it's a time-consuming process, and then you'd have to go through your due diligence of checking and testing and updating and making sure it's good to go before you then bring it back into production. As part of the hardware independent restoration, when we boot the machine up to start pulling the data back from the vault to the machine, we query the new hardware. So we go, okay, well, we backed up an HP machine and we're putting it onto a Dell. The Dell needs drivers A, B, and C, and then we inject those back into the backup stack as we're putting the data in. So the first time we take the restore point and we mount it, we can prove that machine will boot up. It doesn't have to be the same hardware. There are some caveats. We've got to stay on the same processors, but that's basically it. So I can't back up an Intel and go to an AMD. Got to stay on the same chips, but that's basically the only limitation currently. We also use an inverse chain technology, which is very different, and I'll explain this a little more later, to most backup standard technologies. You have to forgive the cough, I'm really struggling today. So the inverse chain technology means that we don't have a dependency on the prior backups. So we take the initial backup, which is the full image of the system, and then every other backup point traditionally is a subset of there. So if we consider the first backup point as point A, point B has a dependency on A, point C has a dependency on B, which depends on A. So if you had a bad backup in that stack and you're not doing your testing, you could have a collapsed chain beneath you that you've got no way of actually using the recoverable data from. So the fact we've looked at making this process more efficient by using inverse chain means that actually each one of our backup points is completely standalone. So we're just using reference points from the initial backup and the point in time when we take the incrementals as well. What that means is the backups complete very quickly. We're not taking a full image each and every time. The amount of data we're passing across the network is minimalized. Obviously, your new data is what you will actually see going across there. But it means that it's very quick in time and it's very efficient in the way it does things. We also have the ability to do backup insights. And again, I'll explain this a little more after. But backup insights saves us the time when we have to actually find something that's been deleted. Because no doubt, if you've been in these type roles previously, someone will come and say, missing this license file from this system or something's been deleted. But when was it last, when did you last see it? When was it last there? Well, I don't know, was it Tuesday, was it Wednesday? Now, if you're taking a backup point every hour, that's 48 backup points you've then got to look through to find the file, the folder, or see where that is. So Backup Insights gives us a visual inspection tool to look at the different backup points and compare them visually. So we have a file structure, we've got the folder structure, and we can see the files that are there in backup point A but not B, and then we can see if the file sizes have changed when they were modified. So actually, you've got a full visual representation, which gives you faster response time to getting back to the files or the folders or the structure that you need to recover that information quickly. We have the ability to do bare metal restores. So I say it's a full image-based system. We don't need to then reinstall the operating system to be able to then put the actual the pen drive back into and just transfer the data. We will back up the entire operating system, the folder structure, everything. So in terms of restoration from a new machine, we put the pen drive in, we turn it on, and we just follow the on-screen prompts. It's a very, very simplified process and will take a matter of minutes. Obviously, full ESX and Hyper-V support, as well as physical machines. So, and we're happy to go either way. So we could back up something that's currently running a physical system, maybe legacy, and then actually restore it into an ESX environment or into a Hyper-V environment. So it gives you the ability to protect it and virtualize it in 1 or 2 steps. And in terms of sizing, we can do everything from a small 500 gigabyte box, which typically do maybe just 1 or 2 terminals, up to 120 terabytes. So in terms of solution size, we can get a lot of data protected very, very easily. So I'm going to touch on very briefly hybrid cloud to explain a little more of how we use it with Proteus. So essentially, on the left-hand side there, we've either got a physical instance or a virtual instance, and that's where we pull the data from, and we back that up to the Proteus vault. So the vault itself is held on site. If then you needed replication of that, or you wanted to make sure that you haven't just got your data in the one place, we actually replicate that to the private UK cloud data center that we've got. So this is essentially encrypted, packed off-site, and held there. So it gives us a few options. One, if we lose the vault, so if your vault's in the same room as the rest of your server equipment and it all goes up in smoke or floods or is damaged, etc., we have the ability to recover directly from the cloud, or we can reseed the vault from the cloud to pull all that data point back through. Or actually, if we really needed to, we could virtualize it in the cloud as well. So if we don't have the ability to locally virtualize it, we could spin it up out there as well. So it gives us numerous different options, and it gives us that second layer of protection. So should something happen to the on-site system, or you just lost the entire power on the site, we could actually get everything back and running and access that data quickly. So now what I've got is a very brief video of how quick we can virtualize a system should it fail.